Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the first meeting of the Eastern BCP Planning Committee for the municipal year 2025 to 26. Where does time go? So first of all, I'll ask the Democratic Services Officer to read out the housekeeping notices and any information about apologies and substitute members.
Thank you. Please note this meeting is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the website for a minimum of 6 months. The meeting may also be recorded or streamed for live or subsequent broadcast by members of the public, although ultimate discretion in this matter lies with the Chair. For those in the room, please note if the fire alarm sounds, please exit the building by way of the nearest available signed fire exit route and make your way to the assembly point at the War Memorial in the gardens opposite the front of this building. Finally, please ensure background noise is kept to a minimum, mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to silent for the duration of the meeting. For those in the room, this includes turning off microphones and turning the volume down completely on your laptops. Thank you. So moving on to apologies. Apologies have been received from Councillor Joe Clements, Councillor Paul Hilliard and Councillor Michael Tarling. Substitute members, there are no substitute members here today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So the first item on the agenda is the election of chair for the ensuing year. So as outgoing vice chair, I can handle this part of the agenda. So I'm seeking nominations for chair of this committee from now for the next year. Are there any nominations?
Microphone, please. Thank you.
Paul Hilliard.
Thank you. You beat me to it. I need a seconder.
I will second that.
Thank you very much. Are there any other nominations? No? Okay. I think that means that Paul has been unanimously elected. Thank you, everybody. Now we move on to the election of vice chair, and for this I'll hand over to Councillor David Flagg to handle this part of the agenda.
Thank you, Councillor Lepedevin. Members, as the member presiding over item 4 on this morning's agenda, I seek a proposal for the position of vice chair for the Eastern BCP Planning Committee for the municipal period 2025-2026. Do I have any nominations at all?
Nominating Marion Lepedevin.
Thank you. Any other nominations?
Anyone seconder?
Seconder?
Oh, okay.
It's been proposed and seconded. Can I just check there are no further nominations for this position? No. Thank you. Can I then hand over to the vice chair to continue the meeting?
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, for a nice, painful, incident-free election in both cases. So we move on to the agenda itself, and the first thing is to ask everybody to introduce themselves for the benefit of those watching online particularly. As you've heard, my name is Councillor Marion Lepedevin and I'm Vice Chair of Committee again. We'll move around the room.
Councillor Felicity Rice, Oakdale Ward.
Councillor Gillian Martin, Boscombe West Ward.
Councillor Joe Salmon, Moordown Ward.
Matt Gillett from Talbot Woods Ward.
Councillor David Flagg, Burton Grange Ward.
Toby Slade, Musselliff and Stratton Park.
Lawrence Williams, Councillor for Littledown and Iford.
Thank you. And then officers we have present from planning, if we could continue around the circle.
Peter Walters, Senior Planning Officer.
Sanju Timana, Team Leader, Strategic Applications.
Peter Burridge, Team Leader, Development Management.
Thank you. And we've already heard from Jill Holyoke, who is taking the minutes and generally keeping us all very efficiently in order. First of all, are there any declarations of interest on any of the items on the agenda? Councillor Martin.
Yeah, the first one, the Captain's Club. I've got a non-pecuniary interest and I did recluse myself the first time this was heard, so I feel I ought to recluse myself again.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we need to confirm the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 17th of April. Is everyone happy that these are an accurate representation of what was agreed? Yeah, well, I'm getting nods and hands up. Yes, thank you, everybody. Just to confirm that if the meeting is still in progress, when we get to 12 o'clock, we will be marking the 2-minute silence. So we'll adjust the proceedings accordingly to allow for that, should we be in that position. So we move on to the first item on the agenda, 8A. That's the Captain's Club. Councillor Martin is going to withdraw, I believe. She's just said so. Councillor Salmon?
Can I just ask it to be minuted? I know you're aware and this is no disrespect to the officers, but I've raised concerns that we don't have anybody from the council's legal team in these meetings anymore, and I'm still awaiting a response from Wendy Lane as to whether there was any risk assessment before the decision was made to no longer have legal support. I'd just like it minuted that I am concerned that change seems to have happened, and I've not had any information as to if there was any risk assessment prior to that taking place.
Okay.
Can I just ask for that to be minuted?
Yes, and Miss Holiat will be following it up to get you a response. I'll say what I've told you personally, that from my experience as a member of the pool only planning committee, we never had legal attendance. I can't ever remember a legal officer coming, maybe for a specific contentious item, but certainly it wasn't routine. So it's been, in my experience, unusual to have a legal officer present at every meeting rather than the reverse. But I appreciate Councillor Salmon's concerns. So now we can proceed with Captain's Club, and I hand over to the planning officer.
Thank you, Chair. Excuse me. Good morning, everybody. This is an application being brought before you for the Captain's Club on Wick Lane in Christchurch. And the application is for an extension to the existing hotel to create additional hotel bedrooms and suites, as well as ancillary plant rooms. I suspect many of you are familiar with the site, but in case you're not, the location is on the River Stour, just outside of Christchurch Town Centre, on the border with the town centre area, and you're looking across towards Wick, which is on the other side of the Stour in Bournemouth. Just a few photographs of the site, just to give you a refresher if you're not familiar with it. The building is the most prominent in the area. It's arguably dominates the riverfront, and is much larger in scale than any others in the area. We've got a few photographs to the rear of the site. So if you can see on the cursor there, that's the rear of the hotel, and the photographs taken here are looking across to residential properties on Creedy Lane that are Creedy Drive that are on the other side. Looking across, I've got some photographs that will represent that more clearly. So if you can see the residential properties here, and then you've got the hotel here. Approximately there's about 39 metres between the residential properties and the hotel building, and in between you've got the car park, which is currently used primarily by the hotel, but there are some end spaces as well. So the proposal, as I said, is an extension to the existing hotel to create additional bedrooms, suites and ancillary plant rooms. This application is a resubmission after a previous application was refused by this committee over concerns regarding neighbouring amenity. Now, in the subsequent time, while this application has been running, the applicants appealed the decision of the committee, and that appeal was allowed. So that appeal was allowed back 2 months ago. So we have an extant planning permission here for the scheme that was refused by the committee, and that's something that needs to be borne in mind as we look at this proposal today. So just showing you the elevations, the changes proposed are adding this additional floor at the top that would be stepped back, recessed, and run the majority of the length of the building, but not entirely. The other element of change is to the rear. So you've got an extension here, which will be clearer when I show some floor plans in a minute. What I've done here is to show you what was allowed at appeal. So as you can see, the upper extension was allowed, as was the layout. So actually the difference between the two, and I'll come on to it on the next slide, is all to do with the windows in this elevation. So the previous application was refused due to concerns about the amenity of the neighbours looking across from the car park. So the original application proposed large windows with no kind of obscure glazing or any safeguarding of the amenity of those neighbours. The inspector has allowed that. The applicant has come back in and proposed changing, and it might be difficult to see on the plans, hopefully you can, that they've annotated all of these windows as obscurely glazed, and what they've done is they've changed the size of the window panes. So the lower window panes are now larger and they would be obscurely glazed. The upper window panes, so if I can keep my cursor still, the upper window panes wouldn't be obscurely glazed, but because they're higher, you'd have less opportunity to look out at them. So the applicant is seeking to address the concerns raised by the committee previously. Officers do consider that this addresses the concerns raised by the committee in regards to neighbouring amenity. The obscure glazing of those windows would prevent you looking out across towards those neighbouring properties, and so officers consider the impact on amenity is reduced, although we have to bear in mind the fallback position of that approved appeal, the allowed appeal, sorry, that could be built at any time. I also just worth pointing out the existing ground floor plan and the proposed ground floor plans, because you can see from the existing ground floor plan, this is where the extension would be placed. And you can see these, for want of a better way of putting it, kind of wings coming out on either side of the hotel. And this is where the extension will be infilled. And you can actually see that it doesn't project any further. It follows the building line here, and it doesn't project any further here. So officers would suggest that that also contributes to the impact on amenity not being significantly harmed by this proposal. I've just put a few of the matters that the inspector raised. So I've pulled this straight from the appeal decision instead of trying to reword it. So the inspector has suggested the separation in greater mass and height of the proposal would be acceptable. Adequate separation between the windows proposed and nearby dwellings, and he's also suggested that in a more built-up area such as this, that would be an acceptable relationship. He's also weighed in on sunlight and daylight in terms of the increase in height, suggesting that that would not be a significant concern. He has talked a little bit about the change to the character of the area, but he hasn't raised it as a concern, and really brings it back to the main focus point, which was on amenity, which was the reason for refusal previously. So he considers it wouldn't be an unacceptable change to the outlook. The parking provision proposed at the moment allows for some parking for non-hotel use, and that would change. So although the number of rooms is being increased and the car park itself isn't being increased, that's being offset by the fact that the car park would be for the use of the hotel patrons. And he also points out that there are public pay and display car parks within very close proximity. And flood risk, because as we'll all appreciate, being on the banks of the River Stour, we are in the flood risk zone. But again, there's a site-specific flood risk assessment and drainage strategy, and the inspector concluded that there would be no significant risk to this development. And as officers, we're suggesting that we agree with the inspector's recommendations on these fronts. So turning to things that aren't really mentioned in the inspector's report, the site is opposite the Wick Village Conservation Area, and so we have to consider the impact on the setting of the conservation area as a designated heritage asset, and there's no objection from our heritage officer, subject to conditions which are proposed. Biodiversity net gain, just worth mentioning, the application was submitted prior to the introduction of biodiversity net gain, so in this instance it does not apply. Nutrient neutrality does apply. Natural England advised that we'd need to consider that, and so we have, and we're proposing the standard condition that the council is using to ensure that credits are provided for the purchase for the purchase of credits for phosphates, to ensure that the increase in hotel rooms does not result in an increase of phosphates entering the River Avon special area of conservation. So the only change to the scheme is allowed appealers to the alterations to the windows. So officers recommend the application is granted subject conditions and signing of a legal agreement. So I should have mentioned the heathlands mitigation. There would need to be SAMS payment, and that is what the legal agreement would apply to, and that's all the standard approach in heathlands SPD. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have two submissions from objectors. They're both written statements that will be read out by the Democratic Services Officer.
Thank you. Dear Planning Committee, my name is Mr Nigel Bason and I write on behalf of the Management Committee representing the 12 residential apartments located at the junction of Wick Point Mews and Wick Lane, Christchurch. We wish to lodge a formal objection to the proposed further development of the hotel situated on Wick Lane. Our primary concerns relate to the adverse impact on traffic safety and accessibility along Wick Lane, a shared access route already under significant strain. Wick Lane serves as a critical access road not only for our residents but also for the hotel, the local rowing club, Creedy Drive residents and the Wick Point public car park. It is regularly compromised by obstructive parking, both illegal and blue badge, on the single yellow line between St Margaret's Avenue and the entrance to the public car park. Accessing Wick Point Mews currently often requires drivers to navigate on the wrong side of the road due to parked vehicles, then make a blind right turn into the development. This manoeuvre is inherently unsafe as visibility of oncoming traffic is severely limited. Exiting the development poses similar risks, with drivers frequently facing oncoming vehicles travelling on the incorrect side of the road or attempting to enter the mews while blocked by traffic awaiting exit. These issues are significantly exacerbated during events on the nearby Quamps, during which Wick Lane frequently becomes gridlocked, posing a clear hazard to all road users and raising serious concerns for emergency access. The proposed hotel expansion would increase traffic volumes and intensify these existing hazards. We strongly believe that approving further development at this location would further compromise the safety and accessibility of an already overburdened and poorly regulated road system. Lastly, the residents' right to peace is disturbed when delivery vehicles ignore current access regulations and are regularly observed using Wick Lane to effect deliveries to the hotel. Taxis also access the hotel until the early hours of the morning, often at speed. For these reasons, we respectfully urge the Council to refuse the application. And the second statement. Members of the committee, for your consideration. Unfortunately, timing prevents me from seeking to address the committee on the 8th of May. I do, however, wish to summarise and reiterate my earlier objections. As previously stated via the planning process, to be taken into account at the meeting. The application should be refused as it proposes to introduce a disproportionate overbuild with its planned additional third floor in this unique quayside location. It contributes nothing to its immediate surroundings, where currently the two-storey build is perfectly proportionate as it stands. An additional floor would be overbearing on this site. It will result in unsustainable traffic and parking increases into a densely populated area with inevitable result of impacting directly upon both immediate residences and the surrounding residential streets, often already stretched beyond limitations. This application will be pushing the boundaries for yet further expansion of a commercial enterprise with no neighbouring benefit to the surrounding tight one-way system currently serving the community or high street. Commercial financial gains should always be balanced against overall enhancement of the location it resides within. Given this has already on numerous occasions been thoroughly and diligently debated and presumably followed with due process by the Planning Committee, no amount of tweaking or resubmissions will alter the structural fundamentals. It is and remains as stated before that this proposed additional floor level should not be permitted, but that the Captain's Club should be proud to continue with its success within its current structures. Mrs. Patricia Huckstep, Wickfield Avenue, Christchurch. Thank you.
Thank you. We have no other speakers registered in support or ward councillors. So we move on to questions from members of the committee dealing with the facts, dealing with what we've heard, any clarification, explanation before we turn to the debate proper. And I'd actually like to start, given that both of these objections have raised particularly parking and traffic issues. I see from the report in the papers that highways have no objection. Did the planning inspector raise the issue at all, deal with the issue in his or her report?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, the inspector did a section on parking provision and concluded that the parking provision, especially with the removal of spaces that could be used by other people other than the hotel to provide for the hotel, would offset the impact of the increased numbers of suites and rooms in the hotel.
Thank you. So, members, any questions? Councillor Gillett and then Councillor Salmon.
Yeah, sorry I wasn't able to get this question to you before the meeting, but when we looked at it before, one of the sort of concerns before it was refused was that the layout that we're approving, where you've got like essentially like a 2-bedroomed flat with 2 ensuite bathrooms and a kitchen and a lounge, makes it look a little bit more like a flat than it does a hotel room. Is there any? I guess is there any way of sort of protecting that it remains as a hotel, or is there any point in that at all?
I'm looking for expert opinion on this.
Okay, do you want me to take that? Okay, so officers haven't recommended any condition to secure the use as a hotel. However, you have to appreciate the lawful use of the site is a hotel, which is C1, and what you are talking about is a C3 dwelling house. So technically they cannot change it without planning permission, and we are granting an extension of a C1 building, not a C3. So we officers didn't see any reason to secure that by a condition. It will be unreasonable to suggest that.
As a quick follow-up on that, under C1, would a long-term Airbnb be acceptable? So if they let it out, what would be the maximum time they could let it out for under C1? Is it 11 months, isn't it? If you have a holiday park.
I can't remember on top of my head, but we are looking at a scheme which talks about extension of a hotel, and running it as an Airbnb would be a different proposal. The scheme hasn't been assessed for an Airbnb. So each case will have to be considered on its merit. If in future they're running it as an Airbnb, they'll have to come back as a planning application for that, if I understand correctly.
Councillor Salmon.
Maybe I've misread my notes, but I am just curious, how much did the successful appeal cost for council on the original application in the end? Do we know?
It's an item of great interest to us, but it is not a planning committee issue. I mean, by all means, ask outside these walls, and I have no idea what the answer is, but it's not an issue for us at this meeting.
And then just to follow up, when we were talking about parking, I might have misunderstood. So the situation is the hotel will be getting bigger, there will be more guests, but to mitigate that, the car park that is currently open to patrons and the public will only be open to patrons. In my mind, that's not a mitigation. That's going to exacerbate the problem. That's going to mean that the general public who would park in that car park can no longer park in that car park, and that there will be an increase in guests. So that will, I don't see the mitigation there. I'm not sure how that's been addressed.
Can you help us?
Thank you, Chair. So, no, there's no increase in parking provision. There are a couple of points to raise. The first is that we've been advised that the existing public car parks are very rarely at capacity. So there is Willow Lane, which is literally around the corner, pay and display car park, which I've been advised is not usually at capacity. Also, the other consideration here is that although we are just outside of the town centre in terms of parking, we are on the threshold of the town centre. So the parking provision is 2 spaces short for the hotel, but if the boundary effectively was incorporated to the hotel, which is next to it, there would be an over provision of parking according to our highways SPD. So while I acknowledge the point you're making that there's no increase in parking numbers, I've been advised there is capacity in other car parks to accommodate that. And as I said, as a kind of an aside, but not that if it weren't for the fact that this boundary was in a slightly different place, we would be saying there's sufficient parking provision, in fact more than sufficient parking provision for the proposed increase.
Okay, one more.
And so just to be clear as well, if we were to refuse this application, essentially the original application would go ahead. That's the context in which we're having this discussion, isn't it? Because I do have other concerns, but I'm not sure they're even relevant, given that's the context.
You're right. That is the appealed plans have been agreed by the inspector, so they can go ahead. So all we're looking at today is the changes, the differences between the appealed decision, allowed appeal, and the proposal in front of us. Councillor Slade.
Thank you. Joe, the 2 car parks there, I live minutes away from there and I pass it a dozen times, if not more, before lunchtime each day. Both car parks are never at full capacity. You're looking at half either side of the car park. You've got to drive past one and to get into the building and then drive out past another to get out. They're never at capacity. And that is on the you have Christchurch Quamps in the summer, parties going on, the car parks are not at full use at sort of the worst of times. So that's those 2 things. And I think we can't forget that if we refuse this, it is going to fall back onto what we've already got that's been passed on appeal. And this is better than what we've sort of already got to give. The concerns of the overlooking the glass, it's better.
We're straying on to the debate.
True. But
you're straying on to the debate.
There you go. And I think let's not forget that we fall back to the appeal.
Any more questions? Right, we turn to debate. So do you want to clarify, add to what you just said?
I think if we refuse this, we refuse that they go to appeal, it costs us. If they don't go to appeal, they're going to fall back onto what they've already got. I think what they've come back with is better than what was initially proposed. But I think we're wasting our time. I think I would like to propose that we accept it and recommend it for approval.
Fine. Have we got a seconder for that? I thought so. Councillor Williams. So any further debate? Right, we'll move straight to the vote then. Those who think we should be approving this application, will you vote in favour now, please?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
And those against?
None.
And those abstaining?
1.
So that is clearly passed. So thank you, everybody. And we can now move on to 8B.
Just pause briefly to collect Councillor Martin.
Yes. We move on to item 8B, the bridge, 947 Christchurch Road, and again, the presenting officer is Peter Walters.
Thank you, Chair. This application is an outline application for the demolition of the existing block of flats on 947 Christchurch Road in Bournemouth. And it would be replaced with a building of up to 7 stories for up to 46 apartments. All matters are up for consideration today other than landscaping. Before I get into the presentation, you will have hopefully seen the addendum sheet. There are a few updates that I need to provide to you, and they relate to the affordable housing provision. Since the report was published, it's been brought to my attention that a assessment had been completed by the District Valuation Service. They concluded that the development would not be viable with affordable housing. As I said, I've updated the report on the addendum sheet, but just to advise that the recommendation today would exclude reason for refusal 4 that appears in the original report in relation to affordable housing as a result of the advice provided by the District Valuation Service. So moving on to the details of the application, the location of the site is in Folkestone, so we are on a plot that is next to the railway line. You've got the railway line running to the south here. Folkestone railway station is the other side of the bridge. This is Christchurch Road going up here. You'll see from the photos in a minute there's an existing block of flats here, but it is a fairly prominent site in the local area. So in case you're not so familiar with the site, I have got some photos to show you. So this is the existing block of flats. It's about 20 years old. They're a block of 14 two-bedroom flats. As you can see, 3 to 4 story, rising to 4 story, with a centerpiece, if you like, of the tower, which is a prominent landmark in the area. So looking at neighbouring properties, we're now looking at the eastern end of the site, and you can see neighbouring property immediately to the east, 951 Christchurch Road, is a very modest property. I haven't been able to find the full planning history on it, but it certainly predates most of the other buildings that you'll find on this part of Christchurch Road, certainly. And this photograph is just showing you behind. There are no windows on the western elevation of 951 Christchurch Road looking towards the development, but you can see that obviously they have rear windows going into their garden. So a few more photos of the site. The tower feature on the end, as I said, is quite a prominent feature. So this is looking just on the eastern side of the railway bridge, and then this photo is taken looking across the railway bridge. Sorry. So we're looking west to east here again. So as I said, the proposal is to demolish those flats and replace them with a building of up to 7 stories for up to 4 to 6 apartments. So in terms of housing mix, the proposed housing mix is 26 1-bedroom flats, 16 2-bedroom flats, and 4 3-bedroom flats. Just to give you some context, the Bournemouth and Folkestone Neighbourhood Plan Policy BAP 6 states the housing mix should be 50% to be 3-bedroom or larger units, 40% to be 2-bedroom or larger, and 10% to be 1-bedroom or larger. So this is clearly a departure from that policy. So moving on to the proposed scheme, these are the elevations. So the elevations here are looking onto Christchurch Road. What you've got is a building that is slightly staggered. So the area to the grey here would be set back from the road. These are the elevations to the rear, so effectively onto the railway line. So this is that staggered bit that I referred to. You might be able to make out, I'm not sure how clear it is, there are some dotted lines which I'll come on to in more detail in a moment, but the blue dotted lines relate to a scheme previously refused by planning officers. The purple dotted line relates to a scheme for a prior approval. So using the permitted development process, there was a prior approval application which officers have a limited scope to object to. So there are certain things that they can consider, but nothing beyond what's limited in that scope. And that is what is shown in purple that was approved. And I'll come on to this in a bit more detail shortly. So these are the side elevations, if you like. So this is the elevation facing the railway. So for context, the existing tower feature is here. So this is, if you were coming down Christchurch Road, heading east, this would be the elevation that would be prominent to you. And conversely, this is the elevation that would be prominent to that 2-storey modest dwelling to the east of the site. So I've shown the ground and first floor plans here. It's worth pointing out that no car parking is proposed, but our highways team have advised that this is acceptable and in accordance with the parking supplementary planning document. There will be a internal bike store, which is here. Again, the highways team are happy with this, and there is a parking bay for service vehicles, effectively. So not parking for residents, but for service and delivery vehicles. You can see a degree of landscaping is provided. As I mentioned, landscaping is a reserved matter, so we can't go into too much detail about the precise details of the landscaping, but it is worth pointing out that there's no direct access for residents on the ground floor to access any of this outdoor space. They'd have to go to the main entrances and go out. And this is a concern for our urban design officers, and one of the concerns is if you did put that patio in, because the area given to landscaping is quite limited, if you did overcome that concern, you'd create another issue by not having any real space to do any proper landscaping with. I should just say there are internal bin stores provided here and here, which are policy compliant. I'll skip through the proposed second and third floors, but these are the floor plans. Each of the flats above the ground floor has their own balcony, so they do have a degree of outdoor space. And again, the proposed 4th and 5th floors and the 6th floor and the roof plan. There is a proposal to use a green roof as part of the as part of the development. So I mentioned earlier in the presentation about the prior approval. And so what I wanted to do is give you a little bit of a comparison of what we're looking at. So the scheme to the left was approved under the prior approval process. This was back in 2021, so I think the time for it to be developed has now expired. However, nothing has changed in policy terms or in national permitted development allowances that would mean that this would be likely not to be supported if it came back in. And so I do think that it's my recommendation that this has to be considered as a fallback position. But you can see what the prior approval allows is for you to go up, but you have to maintain the form of the building, albeit you're increasing the height. So although you have got an increase in height, you've still got the pitched roofs, you've still got this corner tower feature, and undoubtedly the height is significantly increased, but the form is still more in line with what you find in that area generally. The other thing to say about it, of course, is that you don't have the massing, so you are restricted to the building lines of the existing building. You can only go up, you can't go out. So we're not expanding east or west, we're expanding up. By contrast, the proposed scheme, although technically it's not quite as tall because you haven't got the pinnacle of the tower here, if the massing is significantly greater, so it's very hard to make out on the screen, but I will follow my cursor so you can see that this is roughly where the proposed building would come to. So you've then got this additional element on the end. It then comes across, drops down, and then comes down further before coming across there. Unfortunately, it's shown on the plans. Unfortunately, it's very hard to, without blowing it up to a huge size, and then we wouldn't be able to do a side-by-side comparison to show that relationship. But the point that I'd want to make, and the other thing to say, of course, with this is the greyed out area, as I said at the beginning, is set back. So in fact, when you look at this, you think, well, it doesn't really come much further than the prior approval building, but it does. It comes further this way, it goes up further. So what you would appreciate, what you would see from the street, is though it's set back a bit, given the height that we're looking at, it would be a significantly different, it would have a significantly different impact on the character of the area than the prior approval would. I should say, in terms of the housing mix for the prior approval, the additional floors would provide a mix of 1 and 2 bedroom flats, but the prior approval, we have no control over those matters. But as I said, we're very limited as officers as what can be considered. The applicant, I believe, sent a letter around and has provided some CGIs, albeit from looking east from Christchurch Road. It's difficult. I took a photo here to get the perspective, so I just wanted to make it clear this is a 3-storey building here. It's not opposite the development site. It's set back, and it's just the perspective of the photograph. I had the same problem, but you could look at that and believe that they're a similar height, but they're not at all. That is only 3 stories, and as I've said earlier, 3 stories, 2 to 3 stories generally constitutes the character of the area in terms of building heights that we generally find in this area. So what's being proposed is a significant change. So moving on to the officer assessment, in terms of the impact on the character and appearance of the area, the density would be significantly increased. The Boscombe and Folkestone Labour Plan Policy BAP1 suggests an appropriate density would be around 100 dwellings per hectare. This proposal has a proposed density of 460 dwellings per hectare. As I've tried to explain through the plans, the massing is greatly increased on the approved scheme. So although the height isn't significantly different, the building is much wider, it'd be much more prominent when you look at it. Officers do think that this would be harmful to the character and appearance of the area and runs contrary to paragraphs 135 and 139 of the NPPF, which requires design to take account of the local area. There are some significant concerns about the impact on neighbouring amenity, primarily for 951 Christchurch Road. So you've got a modest two-storey building. What would happen is you'd have the proposed building would be much closer. So if I skim back to the floor plans for a second, it would be easier to show you than try and describe. So this is the ground floor and the first floor again. So the ground floor plan would be about a metre from the boundary of the neighbouring property. Now this only goes up one level, so in terms of amenity, that's not a significant concern. However, the rest of the building then goes up all the way up to the top from here, which is only 3 metres from the boundary. So it's that relationship when you talk about 3 metres to the boundary with this very modest dwelling house that officers consider would create a sense of enclosure and cause harm to the amenity of the neighbouring residents. I've talked about amenity for future occupiers, so I won't really go over that again. I tried to explain on the floor plans why officers have concerns about that. We talked about highway safety and parking. Although the Highways Department are happy with no parking provision, and that is in compliance with the parking SPD, because of that, they would expect a financial contribution to be provided to support sustainable alternatives. This has to form a reason for refusal, because clearly we're not going to ask the applicant to provide it if officers are considering refusing the application, but it does come with a caveat that that reason for refusal could be overcome by agreement to sign up to a legal agreement with us to provide that financial contribution. I've talked a bit about the affordable housing. DVS have confirmed the scheme would not be viable with affordable housing provision, which is regrettable, but it's their area of expertise. So as a case officer, I do accept their advice. Biodiversity net gain. Once again, this application came in prior to the implementation of biodiversity net gain, and so therefore the application is exempt from biodiversity net gain. And what I haven't discussed, but what has to be considered carefully, is the tilted balance. We're all conscious that at the moment the council cannot demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply, and where that is the case, we have to consider paragraph 11D of the National Planning Policy Framework. And 11D says that we should grant permission unless, and 11D2 says, any adverse impacts of doing so would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits when assessed against the policies in this framework taken as a whole, having particular regard to the policies set out. In this instance, it's your officer's assessment that the proposal would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits when again assessed against the policies in the framework. So to conclude, we consider the proposal would cause harm to the character of the area, harm to the amenity of neighbouring residents, harm to the amenity of future residents. A financial contribution towards highways has not been provided, although, as I said, that's with the caveat that that could be overcome. And therefore, officers recommend that the application be refused for the reasons set out above. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Walters. So now we come on to speakers. We have no objectors registered to speak and haven't submitted a written statement, but we have Mr. Giles Moore on behalf of the applicant. So, as you know from experience, you have 5 minutes, up to 5 minutes, to talk to us.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak in support of the application on behalf of the applicant, Park Place Properties Limited. The applicants are obviously disappointed that the application has been recommended for refusal. The subjective nature of the reasons for refusal are evident from the case officer's report, and with the application of the tilted balance, there's no reason why yourselves as planning committee members cannot approve this application and deliver much needed housing in a highly sustainable location. The applicant has engaged the council through the pre-application process
and was initially provided with advice that, subject to a series of relatively minor amendments, principally in relation to the elevational treatment of the proposed building, officers would be in a position to support the application. The applicant's frustration following a change in officer, multiple changes in officers I must add, it was relayed that officers, contrary to the earlier advice, are unable to support the application. The inconsistencies in the officer's approach to considering the application is reinforced by the original committee report stating the applicant's viability assessment had not been reviewed by the district valuer. Had this error not been highlighted to officers, you have had a recommendation before you that would have been unsound. To confirm, the applicants have no objection into entering into Section 106 agreement to secure the transport contribution and the Dorset Heathlands mitigation. As such, of the 6 tabled reasons for refusal, 1 has been withdrawn and 2 can be addressed through the completion of a Section 106 agreement. This leaves the 3 subjective reasons for refusal. As councillors, you'll be aware of the significant challenge that BCP Council face in relation to delivering over 2,900 homes a year. This proposal represents a real opportunity to deliver much needed housing on a brownfield site across a range of sizes, and to reiterate, it is in a sustainable location with good access to Folkestone Station. There's also good access to local shops and services, and future residents will support the local shops with additional footfall onto Folkestone High Street. As you've heard, permission exists for the creation of additional 2 storeys to the existing building. This forms the fallback position in your consideration of the application. The character of the locality is a mixed urban environment with businesses and residential properties sitting happily side by side. The urban grain is varied with a variety of building styles and heights, and the application site occupies a focal point within the street scene, being available in views when travelling along Christchurch Road in an easterly direction, and the proposal provides an opportunity to deliver a focal building, improving the legibility of Christchurch Road. As you've seen, the proposal steps up in height, with the 6th floor being designed as a subservient level of accommodation, providing a balanced appearance to the proposal. In terms of the articulation, that's not really been shown on the images that you've had, and we have provided CGIs, but the articulation of the building is evident from the floor plans which you have seen. The building step up in height offers a transition from the adjacent buildings, acting as a focal point at the head of Christchurch Road when travelling in an easterly direction. The reduction of built form from the southwestern section of the site has allowed for increased landscaping when compared to the previous refusal, whilst the building, from a townscape perspective, continues to demark the corner location as it is approached from the west. The officer's analysis of the impact on neighbouring properties has not taken into account the tiered nature of the proposal, with the increasing height stepping away from the adjacent neighbouring properties, nor did the assessment take into consideration the fallback position of the approval for 2 additional storeys being added to the property. The properties on the northern side of Christchurch Road are circa 20 metres elevation to elevation away from the proposal, and the amenity space of those properties on Christchurch Road are to the rear. Whilst the proposal will be visible from the properties, there's no evidence to support the assertion that the impact will be harmful. The officer's assessment in relation to provision and availability of outdoor amenity space is not decisive and reflects the subjective nature of the assessment. The proposed layout plan clearly demonstrates there are landscaped areas directly adjacent to each of the ground floor flats, and the laying out of these landscaped areas can be secured via condition through the reserved matters application. To the west of the site is a large landscaped area which proposed additional and improved planting can be provided, and this will provide outdoor amenity space for future residents. Given the availability of outdoor landscaped amenity space, you need not agree with the officer's assessment, and you'll be able to conclude that the proposal does comply with your local plan policies and also the policies within the Boscombe, Folkestone and neighbourhood plan. Furthermore, it's worth highlighting that the neighbourhood plan notes how much public space is within the vicinity. For example, Kings Park, Folkestone Village Green, Rosebery Road, and of course the nearby beaches. It's clear that with the tilted balance being applied to your considerations, given the significant shortfall in the council's housing land supply position and the pressing need for the delivery of housing, with this application being in a sustainable location, and in terms of character, occupying a transitional location, there are no overarching townscape constraints. Should you conclude that there is harm arising from the proposal, the degree of harm would be slight, and the application's tilted balance would outweigh such harm and allow the application to be approved. The narrow reasons for refusal...
Mr. Moyer, you have now had more than your 5 minutes, so could you stop there, please?
Thank you.
Thank you. And we have with us one of the ward councillors, Councillor George Farquhar.
Some notes from that representation. Good morning, Chair, and congratulations on your appointment to Vice Chair once more. And please convey my congratulations to Paul. Also, please convey my thanks to Paul because in consultation with the case officer, he was kind enough to consider bringing this particular proposal to the Planning Committee, even though it's recommended for refusal. The reason why I press for that, as the ward councillor that called this in, is because we've been here before. Because we have in that location a Boscombe and Folkestone neighbourhood plan, and I think it's important that the committee sees development applications that come in that fly fully in the face of a neighbourhood plan, which was voted upon in the 93.8 percentile to accept it as what we wanted, e.g. the residents, including myself, who live in that neighbourhood. So I've talked before about the sovereignty. I've also talked about the weighting of a neighbourhood plan. I have a question for the planning officer, if I may be permitted. Doesn't need to be answered right now, but essentially we're looking at tilted balance and that presumption for approval for development, no matter the nature of the development, for that tilted balance. I would ask the question, is the Boscombe and Folkestone neighbourhood plan still a current relevant planning consideration? I must also thank the case officer for a very good presentation. When I used to sit on planning myself, I really liked those representations between that was laid out between the proposal and what is called prior approval. I think that painted a very good picture as regards the impact that it would have on official immunity, but also the immunity of that particular location. And I'll allow you to draw your own conclusions from those representations there. We talk about subjective reasons, or should I say, the representation talked about subjective refusal, reasons for refusal. I would disagree with that because there's nothing subjective about knocking down and demolishing a 20-year building, which is only just 20 years old, to build something else and to bring it there. I'd also say that it's not subjective that the housing mix, which is being approved in October, sorry? That's okay. The housing mix which has been approved in the neighbourhood plan is totally out of whack with its development. And also, when you look at the prior applications and the now lapsed prior approval, it gives a very clear picture to me as one of the ward residents as regards what the developer is trying to do in this particular case. Again, talking about subjective, it was talked about good access to Folkestone Station for sustainability. Yes, absolutely. It's a matter of 2-3 minutes walk away once you work your way through the building and out onto Christchurch Road. But it's not good accessibility if you have accessibility needs. It's 42 steps down to that station platform. And in addition to that, the railway just goes east and west, north and south. So we were talking about subjectives to be considered here, then I would disagree with that. The last thing which I'd actually raise, and I didn't plan to raise it here, is the fact that we talk about parking provision and there's no objections from the highway. We're all aware on this committee and elsewhere in our lives that large developments involve a lot of delivery vehicles. The access currently for delivery vehicles is tight and it comes out onto quite a congested road there on the Christchurch Road because it's one of the main routes through east and west. And to only allow provision for a service or delivery vehicle of one for in excess of 40 properties, all having Amazon, Deliveroo, etc., then we find that the amenity, the actual living amenity in a development of this scale is going to be severely compromised. But again, that's my subjective view. So what I would do, just in wrapping up, Chair, again, thank you very much to the planning officer in this particular case for the case. I myself personally don't like criticism of the planning officers, no matter where it comes from, simply because as a committee here, I know that we only see a fraction of the work that they do, and they always work within the guidance, the legislation, the recommendations. So I don't like to see that criticism. And as I say, I would like to put on record my praise for the presentation, which I think laid out. And I'd recommend that the committee seriously consider supporting the case officer in the recommendation to refuse this application. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, and admirably just within your 5 minutes. So now we move on to questions and clarification. And again, I want to start by asking the case officer and the other planning officers for a clarification about the status of the Folkestone and Boscombe neighbourhood plan. It was raised by the councillor whether it's still relevant. I know it is, but the weight we should be attaching to it.
My apologies, Chair.
So I will take that question, if I may.
Thank you.
So as we are aware, paragraph 11D of the NP.
Excuse me, can everybody hear? Because it's.
Okay,
Can you get a bit nearer the mic?
Yeah, sorry, apologies. No. So as you all are aware, paragraph 11D talks about tilted balance and not having 5 years land supply in BCP. We are in the tilted balance territory. However, paragraph 12 in the NPPF then goes on to say that the presumption in favor of sustainable development does not change the statutory status of the development plan, which is, in this instance, we're talking about the Bournemouth Core Strategy as well as the Boscombe and Folkestone Neighbourhood Plan. Now, paragraph 14 says that in situation where the presumption applies to applications involving the provision of housing, and that's what we are talking about today, the adverse impact of allowing development that conflicts with the neighbourhood plan is likely to significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits, provided, and then it says two situations. One, the neighbourhood plan became part of the development plan 5 years or less before the date on which the decision is taken, and the neighbourhood plan contains policies and allocations to meet the identified housing need. So in this instance, the BAP neighbourhood plan was adopted in November 2019, which is now more than 5 years old. So it's kind of, the weight is reduced. However, it does include policies and allocations for housing. So we need to keep that in mind. And BAP is still part of the overall development plan. So it does bite. Make sense? Thank you.
Thank you. Everybody happy? More questions, Councillor Salmon? And then Councillor Gillett, I think.
Just to be clear, if this hadn't been called in by the ward councillors, this application would have just been refused and not be in front of us today. Okay. All right,
That's my understanding, yes. Councillor Gillett.
So just going back to your explanation there, when I was sort of looking at that in terms of the tilted balance, if you go back to that and say, okay, the local plan is more than 5 years old, then we've got to look at the point at which the application was made rather than at the point as of now, because otherwise, if we take it as of now, then we need a BNG as well.
The NPPF clearly says the date of the decision being made. So it's not subjective, unfortunately.
Any more? Yes, Councillor Rice.
Can you clarify what would happen with the existing building if they developed it with the permitted development sort of building on top? Does the building retain and they just build on top, or do they knock the whole thing down and build a similar building with the extra bit? Thank you.
Ms Walters?
Thank you, Chair. The existing building is retained as an extension to the existing building, so it doesn't permit you to demolish and rebuild it.
Thank you. Any more questions? Yes, Councillor.
Just curious, the green, it says a green roof. Is the green roof usable as a garden, or, you know, for people to walk on? Like at San Remo, for example, we've got a garden at the top for residents.
Slaughters?
Through you, Chair, thank you. No access has been proposed other than maintenance hatches. I don't know off the top of my head whether the roof would be structurally able to be used for a garden in that respect, but that's certainly not what's been proposed. So there would be, there would be maintenance hatches which you would need to maintain the green roof, but it wouldn't be available for public use.
Councillor Rice again?
Yeah, just some more information regarding the amenity of the landscaping area for the ground floor flats. Are you able to give a rough dimension of the size of those, and why, can you just explain again why the ground floor flats can't have doors that open onto that space?
Mr Waters?
In terms of the size, I haven't got the dimensions to hand. There's no reason why they couldn't open out onto it in theory. They've chosen not to show that in the design proposal. The concern that we have as officers is because a lot of that space is narrow, particularly the boundary going up towards the railway and also the boundary going towards Christchurch Road. If you introduce patios, which would mean that everyone on the ground floor would have access to the outdoor space directly from their flat instead of having to come out of their door, down the communal corridor and out through an entrance. If you did that, you would significantly reduce the landscaping area there. Granted, there is some space, as the agent for the applicant points out, to the far western end of that site, but you would lose a fair amount of that landscaping because the strip of land each end is not particularly big to accommodate if you're going to plant trees and what have you. Once you start including more hard surfacing there, it's going to be difficult to get the trees. Yeah, sure.
And whilst you're doing that, can I also ask about, has the fact that it's close to Kings Park been accounted for in the officer's sort of deliberations?
It's acknowledged that there's public amenity space in the not too far away, but our design guide encourages private amenity space as well, a degree of private amenity space. So that's what we would look to see.
Another question?
Yeah, on that. With regards to that private amenity space then, is that just for ground floor flats that we require that, or is it covered with the other flats because they've got balconies?
So, through you, Chair, if I may, in response, yeah, so it is providing some outdoor space for each of the flats, so the other flats would have balconies, so therefore they have some of their own outdoor space. Obviously that wouldn't preclude them coming down to the ground floor and then going out into the communal amenity space as well.
Right, I've got another question. The bay for deliveries and service vehicles, from what I can see on the plan, it would involve either reversing in or reversing out. There is not enough space for a vehicle, even a car, let alone a delivery or service vehicle, to turn. Am I correct?
Yeah, there's no space for a turning circle there.
And highways were happy with that, were they?
Highways were happy with that.
Right. Any further questions? Sorry, any further questions? I've got none. We move on to debate, and Councillor Salmon straight away.
So I take quite a dim view of both the application and the reasoning behind its calling. This committee takes a lot of officers' time and public resource. You know, the officers made a really straightforward case as to why it should be refused. I don't think this committee should be being used for political point scoring and so forth. Can I just propose that we refuse this application and move on?
Since there's implied criticism of the caller in, I'll give him an opportunity to respond. Can you come on the mic?
Thank you very much, Chair. I appreciate that it may well be viewed as implied criticism, but to use the word political for a councillor of my service is objectable. And the reason for that is because I'm quite aware of what committees are used for. This is not a political point scoring committee, never has done. It's an insult to every committee member, past and present, who sits on this committee to actually imply that you would allow your political views to come into place. This was called in for a specific reason, as I've represented it before, for my ward representatives and also for the neighbourhood plan and its sovereignty and how important it is for the importance of the immunity of the ward going forward. We are already in place. We already have a neighbourhood plan committee put together, which I help and advise to actually renew the neighbourhood plan. And I personally take great objection on behalf of every committee member here that an implication that I would grandstand or do any political moves within this particular committee. Thank you very much, Chair. Again, thank you for giving me the opportunity to actually speak.
Thank you, Councillor Farquhar. So we move back to debate. We had a proposal from Councillor Salmon that we follow the case officer's guidance and refuse this, but we have had no debate as yet, and we maybe should have some debate. Councillor Williams, do you just want a second, or do you want to debate?
Both.
Right, thank you.
My ward neighbour is a neighbour of this particular site. It's a matter of yards away, and the building's ugly. The amenities are poor, and I would be very, very upset if we had granted, or if we grant this, because it sets a terrible precedent. So I happily second that proposal.
Thank you. But we can still debate further if we wish. Councillor Martin.
I think it's important to have debate because we can then analyse, review applications, so which is helping future applicants and things, and developing the town. It does fly in the face of the current neighbourhood plan, which I'm not happy with, and I think that should be sovereign. I'm concerned that there's only space for one service vehicle. If you've got 40 flats, it's absolutely ridiculous. If somebody's getting their plumbing fixed, for example, or they've got an electrician in, there's just no way people are going to be able to have deliveries. If people are moving in or moving out, that's going to block the one space. It's just absolutely ridiculous. It's very much out of character for that area. Folkestone, top of Southbourne, still has a very village feel to it. There's lots of little cottages around, and it would totally spoil that. What I do like about it, and I think future developers should bear in mind with flats, I really, really like the outdoor of the idea that everybody's got a balcony. I think that's vitally important. I'm very disappointed that roof space, it's a green roof space, but no access to it, no amenity for the residents. I think that's a poor point, really. It's a waste of the roof space. So that's what I would say. I would refuse it on the grounds that it flies in the face of the neighbourhood plan. There's insufficient service vehicle parking, and it's just out of character with the area.
Thank you, Councillor Wright.
I'm happy to support the refusal. However, I would just like to say that it's appreciated to see a development that is focused on sustainable transport. It is in a highly sustainable location from that point of view. So it's good to see applications coming forwards of this design. I quite like the design of the building. So no major objections from that point of view. The affordability of the housing, for me, it would have been much easier to support the application if it had been designed in a way that it could enable sustainable housing on the site, and housing that is the appropriate size for the proportions that the neighbourhood plan wanted. And I'd just like to note that there is some on-street parking right next to the block of flats that would help with service vehicles, and there's other side roads. And also in the future, deliveries are not going to be done with large vehicles. Or some deliveries will not be done with small parcels, are going to be moving towards drones and cargo bikes, which has an impact on the type of facility that would be required for small parcel deliveries. Yeah, that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? I'll have my say at this point. I'm very concerned about the housing mix proposed here. This committee, I and others, have frequently spoken about the preponderance of one-bed flats that are being brought to us. And normally, there's not much we can do to refuse the application if it's acceptable in all other terms, because we have no planning document that outlines an expectation of mix of housing. We know what the housing needs survey document says, but that has no force of law in that sense. But in this case, we've got a neighbourhood plan and that quite specifically lays out what mix of housing should be provided, and this plan virtually tips it on its head. What should be 50% 3-bed, 40% 2-bed, 10% 1-bed. It's almost exactly the other way round. 50% 1-bed, almost 40% 2-bed, and 10% 3-bed. So it's almost completely 180 degrees on what it ought to be. And in this case, we have got, as I say, the neighbourhood plan to base on. So in my view, that is an additional reason which hasn't actually been included by the officer, that I would add that should we go ahead and refuse this, that is one of the reasons added to what's already there. Councillor Gillett.
I'll be very brief. I think obviously there's lots of reasons for refusal on this, but I think if it wasn't for the only reason why we sort of almost need a debate on it is because of NPPF 11 and the fact that you do have that tilted balance if you don't have the 5-year plan in terms of housing. So I think that's really, it's really we're in the framework. Obviously, it doesn't comply with the local neighbourhood plan, but we do need to, as a committee, look at how are we going to deliver this 5-year plan.
So, any further comments? Okay, so we've got a motion that has been formally seconded, but I'll come on to the officer in the meantime.
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to clarify whether you wish to add that additional reason for refusal to the recommendation.
I do. I hope if the committee supports, but I certainly do personally.
The agreement of the mover and the seconder, and just clarify exactly what that reason is.
So are the mover and seconder happy to include that?
Yeah, I'm happy.
Yeah.
Yes, certainly.
Just to clarify.
So to clarify that the sort of wording, you'll refine it, that the proposed housing mix on the development is a long way, this isn't the right wording, does not come anywhere near meeting the requirements of the local neighbourhood plan.
Understood.
Something along those lines is what I would suggest, if mover and seconder are happy.
Chair, if I just suggest we delegate that wording.
Yeah, yes, that's what I mean. Yes, yes. But I mean, we can delegate the wording to you. Perhaps if you could come back to the mover, seconder, and me to just confirm that we're happy with the detailed wording when it comes out. Councillor Green.
We're also including CS 41, paragraph 64 of the NPPF, and just in case we needed it, the failure for the financial contribution in that rejection. Want to take it?
Yeah. Is that in your report already?
That is, I think, yes. That's already in the that's already in the report.
Okay, so
we don't. I mean, it's there already.
So we are also adding BAP policy 6.
Yes.
Which talks about the housing mix.
Yes. Please. Okay, so we've got a motion seconded. We've had a debate to go along with the case officer recommendation to refuse this application. So if you think the application should be refused, will you vote now, please?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Those who think it should be accepted
Just against the refusal.
and those who are abstaining. 1. So that application is clearly refused. Thank you, everybody. And now we'll pause before the next item to allow the case officers to swap over. So welcome back after the comfort break to the Eastern BCP Planning Committee. We have one more item up for discussion today, item 8C, 44 Minton Road. And the case officer, Charlotte Haynes, is going to be online on the screen. So the presentation is already here. So over to you, Charlotte.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Loud and clear.
Good. Okay. Yeah, so this application is for alterations and extensions to the existing single-storey two-bedroom bungalow at 44 Minton Road. This includes raising the roof to provide upper storey accommodation. The application is being brought to committee as the applicant is related to an officer who works within the planning department. As will be noted from the officer report, one objection has been received, and that was from the neighbour at number 46. The application follows two earlier applications. The first proposed a single-storey side rear extension and increased the roof height to accommodate the two additional bedrooms at first floor, which was approved by this committee last year. Following this permission being granted, another application was submitted. This proposed an increase in the side extension to two-storey height, providing 3 bedrooms at first floor. This application was refused by committee at its March meeting. The reasons for refusal were that the two-storey side extension would have both an overbearing and overshadowing impact on the neighbouring bungalow at number 46 to the north, due to the presence of windows serving 2 habitable rooms located in the south elevation of this neighbouring property, and the design of the extension did not respect the scale or character of the resultant enlarged dwelling and would not appear as a subordinate addition to the dwelling. The application now before this committee seeks to address these reasons by making a number of changes to the form of the upper part of the side extension. However, as will be seen from the following plans, these revisions are modest. The application site comprises a detached chalet bungalow set within Minton Road, a cul-de-sac comprising bungalows of various scales, chalet and single-storey hipped bungalows. This map, a lot of this repeats what's been shown to committee at the previous presentation, but I'll run through it anyway for context. The map shows the site's location within Stanpit, where it is bounded by houses on all sides. As you can see there, the dot identifying its location. This aerial image shows the, on this side of the slide, shows the existing bungalow, as you see identified with the red dot, and the address in relation to the surrounding residential development, where you can see you've got hipped bungalows and the chalet style bungalows either side around along that part of Minton Road. Here's the block plan, which shows the proposed enlarged dwelling. The enlarged footprint is as a result of the proposed single-storey rear extension and the two-storey side extension. The footprint is, however, the same as the previously approved scheme for the, obviously, the single-storey side extension before. This is the same plan that's been presented before in terms of the footprint, so the layout's the same at ground floor. There's a larger plan, to larger scale to the block plan we've just seen. It shows the proposed floor plan in relation to the site boundaries with the neighbouring properties, which are also marked. As you can see, it also shows the size and position of the properties on either side, and specifically the window openings on the neighbouring property to the northwest at number 46. Here are the existing floor plans for the 2-bedroom single-storey bungalow, and also the detached garage, which is proposed to be demolished to make way for the proposed extensions, the rear extension. These are the proposed floor plans showing the enlarged ground floor accommodation and the first floor accommodation. Proposed first floor accommodation would provide a further 2 bedrooms, resulting in a 4-bed property. The plans show sets of roof lights on either side of the raised roof to serve as either secondary openings to the bedrooms or to serve non-habitable rooms such as the bathroom. Plan shows the proposed 2-storey extension would have a bedroom, bedroom 3, and bathroom at first floor, which is accessed off the landing there. A Juliet balcony is also proposed on the rear elevation which is set within the eaves to serve the bedroom as per the approved scheme. And then you can also see a further Juliet balcony is also proposed on the rear elevation of the 2-storey extension. In terms of overlooking from this Juliet balcony on the rear, any views would be oblique and towards the rearmost parts of the neighbouring gardens, looking out. These are the existing elevations of the bungalow, which as you can see is single story and has a hip roof. You can also see the matching hip roof of the garage, see a smaller scale, the detached garage there. With the proposed elevations, these show the amended design for the 2-storey side extension that's before us today. The dashed blue line shows the outline of the existing single-storey bungalow. The dashed purple line shows the outline of the approved enlargements to the bungalow, including the single-storey flat roof extension coming out there. And then we have the dashed red line, which shows the outline of the refused 2-storey side extension. And you can clearly see the changes. So the key differences between the current proposed 2-storey side extension and this previously refused extension is a reduction in the ridge height of about 0.1 metres, which is this here, and a reduction in the eaves height here of about 0.9 metres. So it does result in a deeper hipped element, as you can see, compared to the dashed red line of the previous extension. It would retain, however, a 2-storey height, and the front and rear elevations would have a vertical rendered wall up to a smaller flat roof area, which you can see better on that side profile on the northwest side elevation. And also on that proposed front elevation, you can see the 2-storey extension in relation to, they've actually demarcated the side of the single-storey bungalow. So you can see that relationship with the dividing boundary fence there in the middle. This slide shows the enlarged bungalow with the comparison dashed lines on there as well, but it shows it in the context within the road, so you can see it in relation to the bungalows on either side along this part of Minton Road. So we've got the chalet bungalow at number 40, and then that hipped single-storey bungalow at number 46. Obviously, seeing it in totality there compared to the previous slide with the front elevation. This slide is a comparison. So we've got on the top there the previously refused scheme, and at the bottom we have the current scheme. And you can see the difference that we've got between the previously refused extension and the current extension. It's officers' considerate view that the proposed 2-storey extension is of a similar scale and appearance to that of the refused scheme, noting those changes. Here are some aerial photographs. The top one shows the front street side elevation of the existing bungalow and the neighbouring bungalows within this part of the road. And then we have the bottom photo showing the rear elevations of the bungalows. It's a slightly older aerial view showing the rear extension at number 46 being built. Here are the photographs taken from the road, which you see that shows the existing bungalow and the neighbouring bungalows. And we've also got photographs showing the properties on the opposite side of the road and further up to the south onto the junction with Victoria Road, showing some more chalet style bungalows. But again, these are all very traditional appearance and design. This is street view, which really just gives the view of the wider street scene as you're looking up Minton Road, and you can obviously see marked here the application property in its context there. And you can see obviously again the variation of architectural styles, again all of a traditional chalet bungalow style. Now these are some photos taken from within the site. The top photos in particular taken from standing in front of the detached garage, so looking out towards the road, and you can see it's looking across at the side boundary and elevation of the neighbour to the northwest at number 46. These windows, whilst facing onto the fence, as you can see in the photograph, they serve habitable rooms whilst the fence extends halfway up the windows at only 1.8 metres in height, it would not block out sunlight from above, unlike the proposed two-storey extension, which has an eaves height of over 4 metres and extends up to a ridge height of over 6 metres. Bottom photos are taken from within the garden of the application site and show the existing rear elevation of the bungalow, as well as the flat roof extension to the rear of number 46, which you saw in the previous slide being constructed. To give that context, you can see the chalet bungalow on the other side there with the dormer, number 40. Okay. So to conclude, as I have outlined above, the proposed two-storey side extension is very similar to the two-storey side extension previously refused, with only marginal reductions in the heights and the same flat roof design with vertical two-storey high front and rear walls, and similar relationship with number 46. As such, it is considered that the amended design does not overcome the reasons for refusing the last application, and therefore the application is recommended for refusal for the same reasons. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We have one speaker registered, and that is on behalf of the applicant, or in fact is the applicant, Yola Lidka. So you have 5 minutes to address us. Sorry, can you put your mic on? I couldn't hear you.
Okay, sorry. Thank you. Just before I start, I just wanted to say thank you to Ms. Hain for accepting the presentation. So the paragraph 41 of NPPF clearly states that local planning authorities should encourage but not require that developer engages with them before submitting a planning application. Therefore, we haven't went to pre-application advice. This is our proposal, which was supported by design and access statement. The first slide, this two-story extension has been reduced in height and width, significantly lowered its eaves, reduced the roof line, and hipped roof was introduced above the storage, matching the roof of a host property. Site extension would be set away from shared boundary with 46 Minton Road by 1 meter at its closest point. The proportions are 1/3 of entire width of the enlarged dwelling. The largely flat roof design, in fact, is smaller in size than the dormer approved by the case officer last year. We believe the proportions, the set down and setback position, no protruding beyond the rear wall, the eaves and roof design that match enlarged dwelling make this site extension no dominating, subservient residential in scale that complies with local and national design codes. Those photos show possible options for using different facade materials and how it could look under Class A and AA GPDR. Can I have next slide, please? On the right, the most precise site plan of 44 Minton Road available. That's the Ordnance Survey map measured in StatMap tools for officers. It shows same boundary dimensions as planning permission from 2003 on the left. The site boundary hasn't changed since. It confirms that it would be our intention to build no closer than 1 meter from the shared boundary with 46 Minton Road. Can I have next slide, please? The case officer, by refusing this scheme, refers narrowly to few properties within the cul-de-sac, not taking characteristics of the area, its wider context and shared features with over 700 properties between Stampede and Madyford Lane into consideration. Paragraph 135 NPPF and paragraph 44 National Design Guide say that well-designed places do not need to copy their surroundings and that it is appropriate for new developments to include innovation and change to reflect how we live today. We believe the design is sympathetic to the character of the area, respects enlarged dwelling, and does not contrast with surrounding developments. Can I have next slide, please? 44 Minton Road. Christchurch Design Advice Note in paragraph 6 states, it is not a planning requirement for dwellings to have sunlit rooms. although it is preferable for at least some habitable rooms to have a view onto a sunlit external space. The extension will be located 1.7 meters from southeastern elevation of 46 Minton Road at its closest point. Located 70 centimeters from the shared nearly 2-meter high boundary, 2 obscure glazed windows 30 centimeters above the fence already receive a diffused light. The report states incorrectly that both windows served as the sole windows to the habitable rooms. An open dining room is separated by glazing sliding doors to the living area with no entrance from hall. As such, it is not a fourth habitable room with one window only. This is a secondary window fitted in 2022 to this room, which benefits from light and sunshine received through the southwest large patio doors and south side clear window located in the living room area. The proposed extension would be located 1.7 away from the office window and would not break 45-degree horizontal line from this window. The sun reaches its highest point at noon, providing the most direct sunlight to these 3 south-facing windows and producing the shortest shadow of the day. It was neighbors' decision to fit these windows in 2022 that shouldn't be there. And now they objecting to this planning application as a loss of light. Therefore, we do not agree that no longer flat roof extension would reduce the level of light entering these rooms through already obscured glazed windows located beyond the high fence, and that it would have an overbearing harmful impact on that neighbor that would significantly outweigh the benefits of sustainable development. The last page, please, if I can. So in paragraph 42 of this report, the case officer states that is the presence of 2 habitable room windows on the south-facing side elevation and close to the boundary, which differs from the examples given in design and access statement. The examples in design and access statements were all...
I'm sorry,
just last...
Ms. Luca,
Can I just
you've now exceeded your 5 minutes, so I need to stop you there. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So we have no more representations, written or in person. So we come on to questions. Any questions from members to the case officer? Councillor Salmon.
Again, is this a similar one which wouldn't have come to us at committee today were it not for the fact the applicant is an employee of BCP?
Correct. As happened last time, a couple of months ago. Any more questions? Right, move on to debate. Anyone? Oh, I think marginally, Councillor Gillett and then Councillor.
I think looking at the report, I think there has to be a, I don't know if we've reached a tipping point, but it has to be a tipping point where it falls into the, where you know, they make the development smaller and smaller until you say, oh, actually, no, that would be sufficient. When we were looking before, the property was going to be probably the largest on the road in that respect. But I think where it's come to now is it's not too dissimilar to number 52, which is kind of like opposite the property. I think it's about working out where that tipping point is. But essentially, although obviously recommended for refusal, it is actually closer and more in line with the largest of the properties in the road.
Councillor Rice.
Yeah, I did have a question for the officer regarding the overshadowing of the habitable rooms, and there seems to be a representation from the applicant about that they're not habitable rooms. And when these windows were installed, there was a mention about whether they had permission or not. I was just wondering if we could get more clarification on those points.
So, Ms. Hayes, can you help us on that?
Yeah. So these, if you can see it, they use this slide that's been referenced by the applicant's wife. The windows, as you can see marked here, obviously they serve an office. This is a habitable room, and the dining room is a habitable room. Although they point out there's the bifold, the sliding doors here. These were they form part of the scheme for the approved application that they for this rear extension, I believe. Although, as I understand it, I think insertion of the ground floor, because the ground floor windows on the side elevation, it could be done under permitted development. But I think that the changes were done as a consequence of this rear extension that was approved a few years back. As you can see there, 21, that's the reference number at the top. Does that answer your question?
Yes, I think so. So they are defined as habitable rooms. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, they are habitable rooms. See, there's a question about this one in terms of this, whether it's the sole window because they've the sliding doors, but it is a room in itself, and obviously once you close them, I note the point about it being glazed, but they could be any doors, and once closed off, it becomes its own room effectively. And obviously, even without it, even if they are glazed, they're having to sort of borrow light off of the internal space here, so it's not quite the same. But yeah, that's a difference of opinion there.
Thank you. So any more questions? Okay, debate then. I suppose the question really, as Councillor Goodis has alluded to, these changes, are they sufficient to bring it from not acceptable to acceptable? Councillor Salmon.
I'm deeply uncomfortable with us bending the rules. You know, we've been told by officers who've looked at this should be recommended for a refusal. I would just like to propose it for refusal.
Thank you. Have we got a seconder? Surprise, surprise, Councillor Williams. Any debate on this issue? Councillor Martin.
It's worryingly large actually, because like you've gone from a 2-bedroom bungalow to effectively 6 bedrooms. Although it's marked 4 bedrooms, you've got a study and a playroom. So it's an enormous difference. It's from two bedrooms to 6 bedrooms is a massive difference, and I wonder about the character of the area. That would be my comment. And it's that when I went to look at it, which was yesterday actually, I did sort of think that the properties are very sort of cheek to jowl. They're very quite packed in, and the gardens at the back. I mean, you could see through to the property behind it. It all looked it looks a bit of a small patch for such a big extension. That would be my comments.
Thank you. Any more comments? Okay, we've got a motion that has been proposed and seconded that we comply with the officer recommendation to refuse this application. If you think that is the correct decision, that you wish to refuse it, will you vote accordingly now, please?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
If you wish to accept this application, vote now.
1.
And if you're abstaining, vote now.
1.
Thank you. So that is clearly refused according to the officer recommendation. Thank you. That brings us to the end of the agenda for today's meeting. So the live stream is closing now.